We have been waiting 12 long years for another opportunity like the one Notre Dame has today, and it's finally here. The Fighting Irish will take on the Ohio State Buckeyes in the national championship later tonight. And to get you ready for the big game, I'll be answering your questions in a special mailbag edition of Locked On Irish. Let's go.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. Happy game day, everybody. You know what day it is, Monday, January 20th, the day we have all been waiting for, because tonight we get to see Notre Dame square off against Ohio State in the national championship. Before we get rolling, remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. I know there's a lot of you watching or listening who are new to the program. And first off, thanks for joining the ride and for making this your first listen of the day. But I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe, because it helps us out a great deal. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's get into it. I have spent the past week and a half thinking and talking about this game for practically every waking second. And guess what? I'm still not done. I did a solo preview last week. Plus, I had special guests on from the Notre Dame and the Ohio State side to get you ready for this game. But to make sure that I don't leave a single stone unturned, I wanted to make sure that I answer your final questions before the big game later tonight. So today, we're doing another mailbag, and we're only talking about the national championship. I got a couple questions about coaching moves and the transfer portal and other offseason stuff. We are saving that for another show, because we have the next 7 months to talk about offseason. Let's savor the football while we can, and we got one more football game later tonight. So the first question, Mike Lucchini, do we think Jaga getting back involved in the line will be a net positive post-NAP injury? And second question, can Notre Dame recover if the start looks like the Penn State game? Let's talk about that offensive line. So Charles Jaga is going to start at left tackle. He apparently told Molly McGrath, she released that to the media. And yeah, Charles Jaga at left tackle is certainly intriguing. I should mention that I am taping this on Friday night because I'm leaving for Atlanta. So if we get some more news that Charles Jaga is not going to end up starting at left tackle and maybe plays right guard, I'm just telling you right now, I'm taping this Friday. So if any news happens between now and the day of the game, that's why I missed it. So let's just go under the assumption that Charles Jaga is telling the truth. He starts at left tackle, and Rocco Spindler is going to give it a go. I think that there are some potential positives with Jaga playing left tackle. I think he can move a little bit better than Knapp, but I think Knapp is very comfortable. He's been playing all season long, and my biggest concern about Jaga is that we're not sure how he's going to hold up for a full game. Like, he did well against Penn State when he came in relief for Rocco Spindler, but it is a totally different ask to play all 60 minutes after he didn't play a single football game all year long. Like, it's great that he's back out there, but I don't really think he's in football shape. And if this game goes well into the fourth quarter and it's still in jeopardy, or if it goes into overtime, like, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about Jagasaw's endurance. But still, he's a great player. There's a reason why he was projected to be the starter before the season even started. And Mike Denbrock praised him and said that they were really excited about what he's capable of. And I thought his effort against Penn State was really strong. So I think that they're going to be okay at left tackle. Plus, Ohio State doesn't really have that much film on him. So I think that's good. But again, I'm worried about his endurance. And we'll see what happens at right guard. Like I said, I think Rocco Spindler is going to give it a go. We'll see how long he's able to hold up, because he had to leave the Indiana game and he also had to leave the Penn State game. So I give him a ton of credit for trying to gut it out. But man, that is just, it's tough to do, especially if you can't plant on that foot while he deals with an ankle injury of his own. So if there's a situation where Spindler has to come out of the game, then what do? Do you move Jaga back to right guard where he played against Penn State? That seems like you're asking a lot of him. Or you put in Sam Pendleton, who actually started the season at left guard, but clearly things have been not right with him because they put in Jaga over Pendleton once Spindler went out in that Penn State game. So I'm not really sure if the coaching staff is very confident in Pendleton. It's just a really unfortunate situation to be going into the national championship, and you don't really know who's going to be playing on the offensive line. But Notre Dame has been dealing with injuries all year long. That's been like the story of the season, the adversity, and the fact that Notre Dame has been able to overcome it all. So I'm not really going to make excuses for Notre Dame in this one. I think the offensive line is going to be able to hold their own. Second question, though, Can Notre Dame recover if the start looks like the Penn State game? No, I don't think so. I don't think they can afford to go down 10-0 to start the game. Ohio State is just too good on defense to let Notre Dame back in it. I think Notre Dame has to start out hot. I'm not saying they need to go down the field and score a touchdown on their opening drive, although I would really enjoy that. But they need to make sure that they have their foot on the gas and then they are going blow for blow with Ohio State early on in the game because they need this to get to the fourth quarter, because I think that's where Notre Dame has their best chance to beat Ohio State and let that pressure, all that weight that Ryan Day and this team have been dealing with ever since that loss to Michigan, I think they'll really start to feel it in the fourth quarter if that game is still in the balance, and that's when Notre Dame can strike. But if Ohio State goes up early 14-0, and then Notre Dame has to scramble and try to pass the ball downfield, and Ohio State's just waiting for it, I don't really think that's a recipe for success for Notre Dame. So starting fast is absolutely critical in this game. All right, next question comes from @McHaleFC. Do you think one of the wide receivers will step up again like what Jaden Greathouse did versus Penn State? Well, they have to. If Notre Dame has any chance of winning this game, they're not going to get by if there's not some productive wide receiver out there. So I actually think Jordan Faison is going to have a big game. He wasn't as much of a factor in that Penn State game. Give a ton of credit to Jaden Greathouse. He came up huge. It wasn't just that 54-yard touchdown. It was the great contested catch on 3rd and 9, and also the other catch on 3rd down on Notre Dame's final offensive possession to set up Mitch Jeter for the game-winning field goal. I think he gained a ton of confidence when he made that catch right by the Penn State sideline, chirped him a little bit, and that sort of carried him throughout the rest of the game. That's just kind of how it works with wide receivers. If you get involved early, that confidence can help you out the rest of the way. So if Jordan Faison gets the ball early and often, I think he will, because he's a great athlete and he can create some mismatches going up against Ohio State's linebackers and safeties, that's where I think he can excel. And I just have so much respect for this Ohio State defense that I think that Jordan Faison is kind of like a nice little piece for Denbrock, because, when Greathouse, if he's lining up on the outside, or we'll see if Bo Collins even plays in this game, or Chris Mitchell, when they're on the outside, it's going to be tough to get them the ball. But when you can motion guys around and create those mismatches, for example, that last drive Notre Dame had in the first half when Steve Angeli was in the game, they motioned Jordan Faison to the right. He had one-on-one man coverage with the safety, and he ran a slant route where he basically ran behind the wide receiver in front of him, basically used him as a shield, cut underneath him, wide open for a first down. It's little things like that you can do with Jordan Faison to create separation and get the chains moving. So I think he's going to have a big game, but I also think that this could be a big game for Eli Raridon. I bet most people thought I was going to say Mitchell Evans. No, I think Ohio State is going to be keying on the tight end Mitchell Evans because of what he did last year. That was Mitchell Evans' breakout game. He had that one amazing one-handed catch. Ohio State's all right, we know about him. We can't let him get hot. So when Notre Dame comes out in 12 personnel, I think Eli Raridon might be forgotten about, and he could sneak out and catch a big pass. They tried to hit him in the end zone in the Penn State game. He drew a pass interference penalty, so it worked out. But I think that teams kind of forget about number 9. He's become a really good blocker, especially now that Notre Dame hasn't been able to use Cooper Flanagan because he suffered that Achilles injury. So I think that the Ohio State defense might forget about Eli Raridon, and he's going to come up and make a few catches. Mitchell Evans has become the default X factor, or guy who's poised to have a breakout game. I'm going a little bit against the grain. I think Eli Raridon is going to have a few big catches. Not saying he's going to have 100 yards, but I think he's going to come up with some key catches, and I think Jordan Faison is going to be the wide receiver who really steps up in this game. Next one, @Scriber2323. What do you think about Notre Dame's chances of being able to contain Ohio State's receivers? Look, you're not going to shut them down. They're just too good. They're amazing, right? The fact that they have Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman phenom, one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen, and then Emeka Egbuka, a senior who's a stud, who torched Notre Dame last year for 7 catches and 96 yards. He's great. And then Carnell Tate is their third wide receiver. Carnell Tate would easily be wide receiver 1 if he was on Notre Dame right now. So even though Notre Dame's secondary has been terrific all season long, I have a ton of faith in them, they're not going to be able to shut these guys down because they are just too good. So I think Notre Dame is going to run man, and they're going to run some zone. I think there's been a little bit too much talk about Notre Dame running man coverage, and I know that Leonard Moore said that we're not going to, change what we do. That's right. But Notre Dame isn't running man 90% of the time. Just because they run it more than everyone else in the country doesn't mean they run it exclusively. If you look at the data, they only run it 55% of the time. So it's not going to be as much about what coverage they're in. It's going to be about what Will Howard thinks that they're in. They're going to probably try to disguise their coverage as pre-snap to try to confuse him and get him to make some mistakes because, as we know, Notre Dame really needs to win the turnover battle in this game. So I think they're going to throw out some exotic pre-snap stuff to try to confuse Will Howard. Yeah, sometimes they're going to run man, sometimes they're going to run zone, but if they look like they're in man and then they run zone, or they look like they're in zone and then they switch back to man, like that's the kind of stuff that could force Will Howard into making mistakes, and I think you're going to see a lot of that. So Notre Dame has a good chance to try to contain him. I mean, I thought they did a good job last year. Marvin Harrison Jr. only had 3 catches for 32 yards, but he did get hurt in that game, and Benjamin Morrison was covering him for most of that game. So different task for Leonard Moore going up against Jeremiah Smith, but I think he's up for it. So Notre Dame just has to try to contain them as much as possible and limit the big plays. Like Jeremiah Smith caught that little dump pass and went 70 yards to the house in the first drive of that Rose Bowl. Notre Dame can't let that happen. I don't think they will because their secondary tackles exceptionally well, but this is a very difficult task. I think that they're up for it, but we're going to have to see. Don't get shocked or surprised or bummed out when Ohio State's wide receivers make a big play. That is going to happen. It's probably going to happen more than once. It's going to be about limiting and making sure that those don't start to happen over and over again. If that happens, Notre Dame's defense is going to be in a good position to make some plays. All right, we got a lot more to get to. Like, what happens if Ohio State is able to run the ball like Penn State did in the first half of the Orange Bowl? More on that right after this message. Today's episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players, and after your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm all about the hot takes this season. And this week on Prizepicks, I'm looking at Lamar Jackson for more than 250 passing yards and Travis Kelce for more than 70 receiving yards. It's fun to predict and easy to play. Plus, with Prizepicks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. It wouldn't be a true mailbag without a question from Drew Brennan77, who always brings the heat for these mailbag episodes. And he asked, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen ran really well against Notre Dame. What makes you think Notre Dame can do a better job of stopping Henderson and Judkins? It's a very good question because Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are really, really good running backs. But for as much as Penn State ran on Notre Dame in the first half of the Orange Bowl game, they weren't really able to do it as effectively in the second half. So credit to defensive coordinator Al Golden for making those adjustments at halftime to limit the run game. I was really worried because Penn State put together 2 really long drives where they weren't passing the ball. They were just running it down Notre Dame's throat, and they really had no answer. It was the first real time that defense looked gassed. And that's not really a surprise, right? They played Georgia in a very tough physical game and then had to play against Penn State just 1 week later, and there were some legitimate concerns about their rest going into that game. And during those 2 drives, it looked like they were tired. Penn State was running tempo. Notre Dame couldn't sub as much, so those guys were out there for a long time, and they could not stop them. But in the second half, especially once Notre Dame's offense started to pick up and keep the defense off of the field a little bit, then they started to really lock in and shut down that run game. They came up huge late in the game with some big run stops, and I think they can carry that success into this game. Plus, Penn State had one of the best rushing offenses in the entire country coming into that game. They averaged 202.2 rush yards per game, and they were 17th in the country in yards per rush. Meanwhile, Ohio State comes into this game 66th in rush yards per game, and they're averaging 40 less yards per game than Penn State. Part of that has to do with their passing attack, obviously. It's a little bit different compared to Penn State with Drew Aller and their just utter lack of wide receivers on that team. But I think that's pretty telling. Ohio State has really struggled to run the ball at different points this year. It's almost the reason why they lost to Nebraska earlier. Like if they had lost that game, it's because they weren't able to run the ball. They were trying, and it just wasn't working. Nebraska's defense was shutting it down, and then their passing game just couldn't really get going either. Like, that game came down to the wire. Ohio State won that game, but Ryan Day said afterwards, like, they could not run the ball. Now, they were dealing with some injuries in the offensive line then. They have since figured it out. For the most part, against Penn State, they were able to ice the game by running the ball, so it's been pretty inconsistent. And then going up against Michigan, they weren't able to run the ball at all, and it's almost like they were trying to so hard to prove a point, and it just didn't work. I think Al Golden is going to dare Ohio State to run the football. He's probably going to drop 6 to 7 guys in coverage on early downs because you don't want those Ferraris on the outside getting hot. You want Ohio State to try to pound the rock because that's where Notre Dame might have the advantage. Notre Dame's defensive line absolutely has to beat Ohio State's offensive line in order for the Irish to have a chance to win this game. And if Notre Dame's defensive line is able to get some push, get in the backfield, force some tackles for loss in the run game, put Ohio State behind the chains, then they've got a real shot in this game. Plus, you look at what Notre Dame did last year against Ohio State. Like, the Buckeyes only had 126 rush yards in that game, and half of those came on one run by TreVeyon Henderson. Those still count, obviously. That touchdown by TreVeyon Henderson ended up being the difference in the game. But I think the fact that Notre Dame was able to stay strong for as long as they did, stopping that Ohio State rushing attack, tells you that they have a good chance going into this game. So they're going to put a bunch of guys in coverage and say, hey, Ohio State, we're going to give you a light box. Try to run on it. If they take the bait and Notre Dame is able to stop them, they have a great shot. But if they just start running at will on Notre Dame, then they're going to have to change things up, bring more guys in the box, which leaves less guys on the outside to contain the wide receivers, and that is sort of the problem when you're dealing with an offense as explosive as Ohio State. So that is why that matchup between the Notre Dame defensive line and the Ohio State offensive line is so crucial in this game. If Notre Dame can win that matchup, they can win this game. All right, next one. Speaking of offensive and defensive lines, It's Willie V asks, how does Ohio State's offensive and defensive lines compare to Georgia, Penn State, and Texas A&M? Who's got the advantage, and how does Notre Dame try to attack? Well, I can say pretty confidently that Ohio State has the best defensive line in the entire country. Like, they are so loaded in that unit. So JT Tuimoloau, the edge rusher, Notre Dame fans are very, very familiar with him because he was a game wrecker in that game last year. He would be starting on a lot of NFL teams if he went in the NFL draft. And honestly, I wish he had, right? So Notre Dame wasn't going to have to deal with him this year. For his career, he has 22.5 sacks, 43 tackles for loss, and 3 forced fumbles. He has 11.5 sacks in the year, and he's been incredible. He did hurt his ankle in that game against Texas, but he still came back in the second half with a giant wrap on it and played extremely well. So he's awesome on the edge. And then you've got Jack Sawyer on the other edge, who's been playing exceptionally well. He's the one who forced that fumble on Quinn Ewers and returned it to the house. He is a really, really good edge rusher. So that combination right there is elite. But it's not just the edge guys. Their defensive tackles have been playing great too. Number 91, Tyleik Williams, and 58, Ty Hamilton. They've been game wreckers in the playoff too. So every single one of those guys is really, really good. Their starting D-line has a combined 26.5 sacks, 41.5 tackles for loss, and 192 tackles this season combined. No one else is touching that. They are so good as a collective unit. Georgia has Mikael Williams, Penn State has Abdullah Carter, and Texas A&M has Nick Scorton. All three of those guys are future pros, elite college football players, but they don't have quite the collective as Ohio State does on the defensive line. Notre Dame has dealt with some good defensive lines this year. This is going to be the biggest test, but I think the fact that they have had to go up against some good defensive lines, they're at least more prepared to handle Ohio State, but it's still going to be a very difficult task. Now, on the other side of the ball, I think Penn State has the best offensive line of the group. Texas A&M's offensive line was just not that good against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's defenders were in the backfield all night long, made life hell for Connor Wigman. They couldn't run the ball at all against Notre Dame, so I don't think the A&M offensive line was that great. Georgia was not very good either. Notre Dame was wreaking havoc on Gunnar Stockton all game there. Penn State did have a good line. Like, we saw that in the first half of the Orange Bowl, and they kept Drew Aller clean for most of the game. It was tough sledding for that Notre Dame defensive line. So I think Penn State has the edge there. We're going to see with Ohio State because they've been very inconsistent all year long. Like, I talked about how they could not run the ball against Nebraska. But then again, teams have really not been able to get Will Howard on the ground. They're 10th in the country in sacks allowed. So even though they've had some moments where they're not really getting that much push in the run game, they have protected Will Howard. Plus, he can move. He's good at avoiding sacks. So I would put Ohio State as a close second on that of the offensive lines compared to what Notre Dame has gone against this season. But I still think that they're gettable, and they have to be gettable, right? Like I was saying, Notre Dame's defensive line really has to get some pressure if they're going to win this game. But I am more concerned about Ohio State's defensive line, especially given the fact that Notre Dame has another reshuffled offensive line unit. Like, I'm much more concerned about their defensive line. And what can Notre Dame do to attack them? Just keep them guessing. Get the ball out quickly so they don't have a chance to get back there, because if you try to run these long, drawn-out plays, that's just going to give them more time to get in the backfield and sack Riley Leonard or get a tackle for loss, and Notre Dame cannot afford to do that in this game. All right, next one. Another mailbag regular, Voluntary Joel 41, who says, rank these props over under. I don't know if he's saying over under on every single one or rank them in terms of your confidence. So I'm just going to do both here. Jeremiah Love, anytime touchdown. Feel very good that that is going to hit in this game. Ohio State sacks, 2.5. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to take the over because their defensive line is just so good. They already have 16 sacks in 3 playoff games, so that's exceptional. And then considering Notre Dame gave up 5 last week to Penn State, I think they're probably going to get 3 or 4. That's probably the most Notre Dame can afford to give up in this game, but unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to take the over there. Mitch Jeter field goals, I think I'm going to have to take the under slightly. I do think he's going to knock one in. I'll give you my final score prediction in the next segment, and I'll kind of get to where I think Mitch Jeter is going to come into play here. So I'm going to take the under. And then for Jeremiah Smith, touchdowns, the last one he gave me here, 1.5. I'm also going to take the under on that as well. I think he's probably going to get in the end zone. I'm pretty pissed off at Texas because they did so much to shut him out that I think that Ohio State's going to be like, all right, we got to get the ball to number 4 early in this game. So even though Notre Dame is going to try to bracket him and provide extra coverage on his side, they're going to give him the ball because he was basically a non-factor in the first game on the stat sheet, but he was absolutely a factor in the game because Texas was giving him so much attention every time he was out there on the field. So in terms of my confidence in these picks, remember, I'm taking Jeremiah Love anytime TD. That's an obvious yes. Ohio State sacks, I'm taking the over on 2.5. Mitch Jeter field goals, I'm taking the under on 1.5. And then Jeremiah Smith touchdowns, I'm taking the under on that as well. So in terms of my confidence, I am most confident in Love getting a touchdown. Behind that, probably Ohio State sacks. Then Jeremiah Smith touchdowns and Jeter field goals because he's come up big for the Irish a lot. Maybe he goes out there and has to kick more than one field goal. And if he goes out there, I'm going to be confident in him that he's going to make it. Okay, coming up next, will Riley Leonard cement himself as an all-time great if the Irish can pull off the upset? Plus, let's all imagine the perfect ending for this national championship game. What would that look like? My answer is coming right up. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Listen, there are 3 games left in the NFL season. AFC Championship, NFC Championship, and the Super Bowl. So get in on the action while you can with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we've talked a lot about what Notre Dame needs to do to win, right? That's been a big topic, obviously, with all the preview content I've done. I already spent the first 2 segments talking about it. But you know what? Let's fantasize a little bit. Let's think about what would happen if Notre Dame does win. And that leads me to the next question from Connor Cross 17, a fan favorite in the mailbags. If the Irish pull this off, will Riley Leonard be a top 5 quarterback in Notre Dame history? This is an interesting question because it depends on how you look at it, right? In terms of great careers, I don't think you can put him up there with, let's say, Joe Montana, Joe Theismann, Brady Quinn, or even Ian Book, because Ian Book is the all-time winningest quarterback, and he was a starter for 3 years. And these guys are just around longer. I think they played way more games. They have better stats than Riley Leonard, all that stuff. I also think every single one of those guys I just mentioned is probably a better thrower than Riley Leonard, but you can't discredit his legs. He has been such a great dual threat for Notre Dame all season long and is a big reason why they are even in this position. But in terms of legendary status, a win in this game would absolutely put him in the top 5 quarterbacks of all time. If he's the guy who ends the drought and wins a national championship for Notre Dame the first time in 35 years, you've got to put him in there, right? We talk about Tony Rice as a legend, but do we talk about Tony Rice as a great quarterback? No, because he wasn't. He couldn't really throw the ball, but he ran the option and was a great runner, so he didn't have to. So Riley Leonard would be up there with Tony Rice. They would be on the same level pretty much because they're very similar. And Riley Leonard is a better thrower than Tony Rice. He might not be as good of a runner, but he's pretty damn good. So whatever you think about Tony Rice, wherever you would put him in the Notre Dame lore and Notre Dame legend status among quarterbacks, you got to put Riley Leonard in there, right there with him, if Notre Dame is able to pull off this upset. He's only here for 1 year, and he'd probably be the most polarizing player in the history of Notre Dame. But if he wins a national championship, he's a legend. Everyone on this team is a legend. Marcus Freeman, the whole coaching staff, like they're going to build a statue of Marcus Freeman if they win this game. It would be the biggest win in school history. I've been saying that all week long. I feel very confident in that. I know some of the old heads will disagree with me. They'll point out, the win over Texas in 77 or Alabama. I think the Alabama one is definitely the closest thing to this, but when you consider the stakes, the fact that it's the first ever national championship in a 12-team playoff, you're going up against a team who a lot of people think they're like a super team. The fact that Notre Dame has not won a national championship in 35 years. The fact that there was one point where some people ever wondered if Notre Dame would ever be in a position like this again. And they're here, and they have a chance to win it. And if Riley Leonard is the guy to do that, to lead this team to a victory, he's a legend forever. He might not get a statue, but we can put him in the top 5 quarterbacks of Notre Dame history, even if we can all admit he's not the best passer. But neither was Tony Rice, and he's a Notre Dame legend without a doubt. Next one, Luke Smith. Not really a mailbag question, just says, draw up your ideal ending to the title game. So I've thought about this a lot. Obviously, like a game-winning field goal as the clock expires or a touchdown in the last second of the game would be historic and it'd be legendary and it'd be great for like the YouTube highlights and we'd tell people about it forever. But in the moment, that would actually be terrible, right? Like the tension going into that where the seconds are winding down and Notre Dame has to score late and they could miss a field goal, like that would be so tense and so nerve-wracking. I think I would be miserable. Like that's actually the funny thing about watching your favorite team play in games like this. At least if you're like me. Maybe you're different. Maybe you have a much better approach to this whole thing. But I can just tell you from personal experience, it's miserable watching your team play on the biggest stage with a chance to win it all because I'm just so nervous. I have like a pit in my stomach for the entire game. And then when it's over, you either feel the relief and the satisfaction of winning it, and then it all comes out at once, and it's like the best feeling ever, or it's just absolutely devastating. And oddly enough, I've been able to watch my teams play in the championship a lot. This is going to be the third time that I'm going to be able to attend a game where the team that I'm rooting for has a chance to win the championship. First time, 2012 national championship against Alabama. That game was over immediately. Then we got 2016. I'm a diehard Cleveland Guardians fan. Back when they were the Cleveland Indians, I was at that World Series Game 6 against the Chicago Cubs. The Indians were up 3-2 in that series. I'm there. It's in Cleveland. They've got a chance to win it all. They go down 3-0 in the first inning. And then Addison Russell, I believe, hit a grand slam in the third inning. And the game was over pretty much right away. I just sat there the rest of the game thinking about Game 7 the next day. That was not a whole lot of fun. So 2024, here we go again. But I did see one championship. Cleveland Cavaliers, 2016, Game 7 of the NBA Finals. They beat the Golden State Warriors, arguably the greatest NBA team ever assembled. And I will never, ever forget the experience watching that game. I had watched Games 1 through 6 with my friends. But then I had to watch Game 7 alone in my basement because I was just so tense and so nervous. And that was, one of the greatest NBA games ever, and it came down to the wire. So I don't really want to relive that again. So going back to Luke's question, I think the best way, the ideal way that this game plays out is that Notre Dame just comes out and blows the doors off Ohio State. Like imagine if Notre Dame did to Ohio State what Georgia did to TCU a couple of years ago when they won like 66-7 or something insane. That would be amazing. That would be like a 3-hour-long party in Atlanta. We'd be celebrating the whole time. We'd be able to soak it all in. There'd be no tension. It would just be amazing. But that's not going to happen, right? We all know Notre Dame is not going to blow out Ohio State. It's not realistic. So what I really want, that's what I consider realistic, is basically revenge for last year. I want Notre Dame to score the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter, have a great moment, right, where they take the lead, they've got a chance to win it. Then I want them to stop Ohio State on fourth down and get the ball back with a few minutes left and just run the ball right down their throats, burn the clock, and win the game. That's what they should have done last year. That's what they could have done last year, and it didn't happen. So I want them to have the same exact opportunity, but actually get it done this time around. And then to do that, to just physically impose their will on Ohio State in the national championship game as the clock winds down, that to me is the best case scenario because it's tense. It would be much better than Notre Dame trying to claw back if they're down and they're, you're just panicking, thinking, oh my God, are they going to lose? Are they going to win this? Like if they just do that and they just ice out the clock there at the end of the game, I think that would be the most fitting way for this game to end. It'd probably be the least nerve-wracking of the more rational possibilities for this game to end. But I just think big boy smash mouth football and bury this Ohio State team once and for all. That is my dream scenario. That's what they should have done last year. They didn't do it, but I think if they get a chance to do it this year, there's not going to be a screenplay. They're just going to try to run the ball and basically do exactly what they did to Georgia, but this time they finish the job and they just run out the clock and they get to knee it. They don't even have to give the ball back. That would be my ideal ending. Last question, Micah Towery. How are you going to celebrate when Notre Dame pulls off the upset? Well, first of all, Micah, I love the confidence. But personally, I've tried not to think about this too much because when the thought crosses my mind, like I honestly don't even know and I don't want to get my hopes up or anything like that. But growing up, I wanted two things more than anything. I wanted to play football for Notre Dame, which didn't happen. We're going to have to settle on just getting the degree from the university and, winning an inter-hall championship in the stadium. No big deal. The second thing was I wanted to see this team win a national championship. Like outside of the health and safety of my immediate friends and family, I want this more than anything. And yeah, I realize how ridiculous that sounds, but I'm also a guy who has a podcast and talks about this team every single day. Like I think that's probably the expectation here, right? That I really want them to win a national championship because I've never seen it in my life. And there were many times where I doubted if I ever would see it. So the fact that they even have the possibility to do it again tonight is not lost on me. Like I'm really trying to just appreciate this moment for what it is because this could be truly historic. And I already told you about my history in 2012 and 2016. Now here we go again. And if I were to rank how much I care about my teams, I always think this is an interesting exercise, right? So Notre Dame football here, I would put the Cleveland Guardians like a close 2. And then like a pretty big drop off now with the Cavs because, I already got one with the Cavs and LeBron's not there. So it's not quite the same. And they didn't, they already ended the Cleveland title drought. And then at the very bottom, the Browns, because they're just a dumpster fire and I almost hate them. But now that Tommy Rees is the offensive coordinator, I'm going to root for them a little bit harder now. We'll see how that works out. But anyway, Notre Dame is 0-1 in national championships. The Indians are 0-2 in my lifetime. The Cavs are 1-4. The Browns are the saddest excuse in all of sports. So that is a combined 1-7 of my teams in championship games. So more often than not, they get really close and lose. So I've been dealing with that pain and that sort of those memories coming back. And I really just don't want to get my hopes up. But I also think that Notre Dame can win this game. And if they were to win this game, it would make up for every sports failure in my lifetime. Like, I don't even know if I'd have to watch sports anymore. This will be the peak. There is no way it could get any better than this. Being at the game, watching my favorite team that I have loved my whole life beat Ohio State, a team that I hate more than anything in the national championship, is a literal dream come true. So I think I'd probably go into a state of shock. That's kind of what happened after the Cavs won when they beat the Warriors. I was like, wait, did that really just happen? Did the refs blow the whistle? Are we sure that this is over? And it was. And then finally, I think I let out a yell and I started smacking my couch. So I'm not going to do that, obviously. I don't want to hit anyone. So I think I'll reach a state of shock. And then once I come out of that, I'll just hug my parents because I'm going to be sitting with them in the crowd. I'm going to hug every stranger around me in the Notre Dame section. And then I'm going to find my friends, hug them all. And then we're just going to party our ass off in the parking lot after the game because that is something that we have all wanted for so long, and I'm sure you have wanted it as well. So we're going to find out later tonight if the Irish can finally get this done, this 35-year drought, this thing that we have been waiting for so long. Can they get it done tonight? I think they will. I have said all week long my score prediction is Notre Dame 24-21. Ohio State is the more talented team, but Notre Dame doesn't have to be more talented than them all the time. They just have to do it. One night only. Can Notre Dame be the better team in Mercedes-Benz Stadium? I think they are tonight. I think they get it done, and we're all going to be celebrating for a long, long time. But that's going to do it for me today. That's really all there is left to say about this game. Enough talking. Let's play some damn football. By the time you are listening to this, I'm going to be in Atlanta for the game. I fly out first thing on Sunday. I fly out first thing tomorrow, Tuesday, after the game. So I won't have my national championship reaction show until Tuesday evening, once I'm back home in LA. But man, what an episode that's going to be. I'm either going to be the happiest person on the planet and we'll all get to celebrate, or I'm going to be incredibly sad and we're just going to have to try to push through it together. But either way, I'm so grateful for you and everyone else who has tuned into this show throughout the season. This has been the most fun I've ever had in my professional career, talking about this team every day throughout a magical season. And as excited as I am about this game, I am admittedly very sad that this season is coming to a close, but no matter what happens tonight, I'm going to be back here tomorrow and every day after that to react to everything that we see on the field. So make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast and enjoy the game tonight. Really, soak it all in because these opportunities only come around a few times in a lifetime. So appreciate the good and the bad. But as I've been saying, I think Notre Dame is going to get it done tonight and end that championship drought. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Go Irish.